Good evening. I will call the meeting to order at this time. If you will please rise for the invocation and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll call on Councilman Travis Scott to lead us in the invocation, please. Councilman Scott.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we come tonight to do business for the community that we're very proud of to live in and serve in, Father. We pray that you give us your blessings, Lord, in this community, in this meeting, to make decisions that benefit this community as a whole. Father, we're very thankful for the new staff members that are coming on and we're going to meet tonight. Pray that you'll bless them in their service as they protect our community and help us stay safe. Father, we pray a special prayer, Lord, for the families of the victims from last night's flood. We pray that you'll feel there's a miracle that we may find those children, Lord. But Lord, most of all, Lord, thank you for all the things that you do for us and keeping us safe. And during this time, Lord, I ask in your name, amen.
Amen. You'll join me in the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, gentlemen, you have the agenda in front of you. I do not have any known changes. Any changes, additions, corrections to the agenda?
Mayor, I would like to ask consent agenda item number 7 be moved to business item. It can be number 6.
Consent agenda 7, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. To new business. Okay. Okay. Any other changes? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended, removing consent agenda item number 7 to business item number 6.
I make them. So moved, Mr. Mayor. I second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, our first presentation this evening is administering the oath of office to our new police officer, Alexander Watts. How are you doing this evening, sir?
Well, hope you are, sir.
Good. Who do you have with you this evening?
My mother and my uncle Keith.
Welcome. If you will, please place your hand on the Bible and repeat after me, sir. I, Alexander Watts,
I, Alexander Watts,
the undersigned,
do
do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will faithfully
that I will faithfully
and bear true allegiance
and bear true allegiance
to the state of North Carolina
to the state of North Carolina
and to the constitutional powers
and to the constitutional powers
and authorities
and authorities
which are
which are
or may be established
or may be established
for the government thereof,
for the government thereof,
that I will endeavor
that I will endeavor
to support,
to support,
maintain,
maintain,
and defend
and defend
the Constitution of said state,
the Constitution of said state,
not inconsistent with
not inconsistent with
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
that I will be alert
that I will be alert
and vigilant
and vigilant
to enforce
to enforce
the criminal laws of this state,
the criminal laws of this state,
that I will not be
that I will not be
influenced in any manner
influenced in any manner
on account of personal bias
on account of personal bias
or prejudice,
or prejudice,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
execute the duties of my office
execute the duties of my office
as a law enforcement officer
as a law enforcement officer
according to the best of my skill,
according to the best of my skill,
abilities,
abilities,
and judgment,
and judgment,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations, sir. Be safe, be careful, Godspeed. Okay, at this time, we'll move on to our next presentation, which is update from the Public Library of Johnson County in Smithfield. Renita? How are you doing, Ms. Barksdale? That's fine, welcome. I will ask, I know it's a little difficult there, but if you can, please try to speak into that microphone as much as possible as you're doing your presentation.
Okay. Try to slide this in so I don't mess up anything else over here. Okay, can y'all hear me clearly? Okay, because if not, I'll be loud. I used to be a drum major. So first off, I want to thank y'all for letting me come in and just give you an update of what's going on in the library. So it's going to be quick because I know y'all have a big agenda. So I'm just going to leave some room for questions if you have any at the end. So at the end of the fiscal year, we ended up getting our budget. So the county gave us $589,000, the town gave us $270,000, the state gave us $196,000. So that left us with about a $1,055,000. So we realized that there was going to be a problem. The board worked hard, and we really did a lot of going through different scenarios to figure out how we're going to make sure this library is going to be in the green, in the black for next year. We did not want to have the same situation that we had last year. So we really worked hard because we wanted to make sure that we have a great relationship with y'all. So what we did was we ended up having to lay off 4 people. So that 4 people were 2 full-time and 2 part-time. With us laying off the 2 full-time, that changed a little bit of how we were handling things at the library, which means that the two full-timers that were laid off were our processor and our cataloger. So that means now that the vendors are going to be doing it for us. So that is a cost savings for us. So that means when the books come in, they'll already be processed with our spine labels, our barcodes. It's also going to be cataloged with everything. So when the books come in, we just have it in the system. So in a way, it'll be shelf ready. So your residents don't have to wait. Your residents don't have to wait long for those items. Sometimes it took about a month before those new items got on the shelf. So, but now with this new system, the books are ready to go. Also, we had to lay off 2 part-timers as well. But those 2 part-timers being laid off and the 2 full-timers and just playing with, okay, and with just doing some little tweaks here and there, we saved about $130,000. So that's a good thing. So at the end of the year, if we accidentally spend all the money, we'll still be in the black. So that is one good thing. But we're not gonna spend all our budget. But it's just to show that we're doing our due diligence to prove that we're going to do our best to make sure we're being good stewards with our finances. One of the things that we've done since we've been closed, even though we've been closed and people can't come in, we're still doing services for our patrons. One of the things we've done was a virtual library card. This virtual library card is for people who are just coming into town who don't have library cards. So if you don't have a library card, you can register online and you can get a temporary virtual card. So that means you can use our e-resources. You can also use our databases. Because we want to make sure people who are coming into town or people who don't have a library card can still get resources, still use our system. This temporary card is good for 6 months. Once we open back up, which we have a date of September the 8th, when we open back up, the people who have virtual library cards can come in with their driver's license and they can update that temporary card to a regular library card so they can start checking out material. So right now we've registered about 275 people with this new virtual library card. We're also doing curbside services. This is allow our patrons who have library cards already can still continue checking out material. So we started this in March. So we have over 1,500 people that are using the services so far. So that allows people to say, we want, let's say, Hunger Games. We get that book, we'll wrap it up, put the last for the library card, put it in the foyer, and they can pick it up so there's no contact. And so we also been changing some things so when the patrons do come in. So what we've done is we add plexiglass to our circulation children's desk and our reference department. I bought face shields, masks, and we also added hand sanitizer stations. So when we do open up, there's places where you can use the hand sanitizer. And if you do return a book, we quarantine it for 24 hours. We also use disinfectant and we spray the book before we put it back on the shelf. So it's not like we're spreading anything. Also applied for a CARES grant. The CARES grant, we was awarded $7,600, and that is going to be used for laptops and classes. So we know several people have been laid off due to COVID. So whenever we open back up, we're going to start doing computer classes. We're going to get unemployment officers. We're hoping we can get the unemployment office to come in and teach the people how to file for unemployment, how to do resumes. And those laptops will be used when the computers are all filled, so we can make sure we're helping our community at all times. And that's a quick presentation of what's going on in the library so far. Any questions?
Ms. Barksdale, I would like to say thank you for coming tonight and for what you do in the community. I do have one question. How many full-time staff does that leave you with?
That leaves me with, that's a good question. I want to say that leaves me with, I want to say, let me count on my hand, because I don't want to lie to you. I want to say that leaves me with 8, but I want to make sure, though. But I can actually send you an email just to make sure, because I want to say 8, because that's the number that's in my head.
Did you have to reassign some roles when you?
Yes, so a lot of my team is now being cross-trained, because that means now we got to think about how we're going to handle things when we open up to full capacity. Because now my part-timers have to be cross-referenced to do reference as well. Because one of those part-timers was my reference person who could go back and forth and handle everything as a reference assistant reference person. So now one of my part-timers that was just circulation is now going to have to be retrained on how to do reference. But I mean, it also gives my whole team an opportunity to learn everything, because it was very departmentalized at the beginning. But now everybody's going to have to learn and pitch in and learn all different types of training.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Appreciate the update. Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to the public hearing section. This is, our first public hearing is not a quasi-judicial hearing, so there's no need for anyone to be sworn in. First public hearing is a ZA 20-02, Leslie Thomas. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the Town of Smithfield UDO Article 6, Section 6.5, Table of Uses and Activities to allow for child care centers as an accessory use to churches/places of worship as a special use in all zoning districts that allow for churches/places of worship. This time, gentlemen, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing. I have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor? All opposed? Stephen, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'm not going to repeat what the mayor just said, but that is the request. So child care centers are regulated by the Division of Child Development and Early Education. A child care arrangement where at any one time there are 3 or more preschool-age children or 9 or more school-age children receiving child care. This can be in a residence, also with a maximum of 6 to 12 children or up to 15 school-age children. So religious-sponsored programs are given the option in child care law to operate under a notice of compliance with child care rules and laws rather than a child care license. They meet the rules for a one-star license, except that they are exempt from certain childcare rules regarding certain age-appropriate activities, staff qualifications, and training requirements. The Division of Child Development and Early Education monitors programs that operate under the Notice of Compliance in the same manner that all other programs are monitored to ensure safety and health of the children. If a religious-sponsored program receives child care subsidies, the exemptions apply, except they must meet the health, safety, and training requirements of staff. So, the history of child care centers in Smithfield. In 1994, the zoning ordinance permitted daycare establishments in all residential zoning districts with a Board of Adjustment approved conditional use permit. Subsequent Unified Development ordinances adopted in 2008 removed daycare centers from the list of permitted uses in all residential districts. All daycare establishments permitted before 2008 are now considered legal nonconforming, and they cannot rebuild if destroyed by fire or natural disaster. In the 2016 UDO, child care centers are not allowed in residential districts as either primary or accessory uses. Okay? So that's where we are today. The draft ordinance before you will allow child care centers with a special use permit as an accessory use to churches and places of worship in all zoning districts that currently allow for churches and places of worship. All child care centers accessory to churches will be required to meet the supplemental regulations for child care centers and churches and places of worship, the two standards we have in Article 7. And this is just a summary of the regulations for child care centers, which is in your packet. I'm not going to go through it. And then we have a few more here. And then for churches, talks more about competing with business uses. That was the bigger issue last time this was before the council. So the ordinance amendment physically in the code will look like this. Child care centers as an accessory use to churches will be added to the table with a S for special use permit and a second S for supplementary standards. And that'll tell everyone that you've got to go to the standard 7.4.1 or 7.32 and make sure you're compliant with all those with the permit. Staff believes the zoning text amendment as proposed is consistent with the comprehensive growth plan and other adopted plans and is reasonable and in the public interest. Staff is recommending approval, and the planning board also recommended approval of ZA 2002 with a statement declaring the request consistent with the comp plan and that's in the public interest. And here's a recommended motion. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Any questions for Stephen this time from the council?
Stephen, you said that this UDO made other businesses not non-compliant. It's already a thing that's going on, right? There's many of them.
There are many, I can't tell you how many, but there are daycares in churches, in residential districts currently.
Yeah, and I think that's a fine, but my question is my point is the UDO is no good.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
I said the UDO is no good.
UDO is,
No
The UDO is no good.
what do you mean?
Why do we even do this? I mean, why do we make these changes to make all these businesses non-conforming?
I couldn't tell you what was in the reasoning behind taking childcare centers away from churches or out of residential districts. I don't know. I wasn't aware of it until we had this application before us. But we do have many churches in residential districts, and daycares churches tend to be kind of a full service provider for children and families, so they'll do, offering daycare, they'll do after-school care sometimes, they'll do other family service things out of churches, as you all know. And, a lot of the churches in business districts, they would still be allowed to do this, but in the residential districts, they no longer are able to do it, and this ordinance would change that.
But you just stated there's many already doing it, so, I mean, again, it's very frustrating to me. We write this stuff and we don't get it right before we put it in place and put people in non-conformance or non-compliance. So I struggle with that. Every meeting we have to redo the UDO, which is fine to make it right for the people, but why is it not already right? I mean, how many other businesses and things are not conforming? I mean, that's the struggle that I'm faced with right here. But carry on.
And my concern is that it appears that, it would be nice to know why the decisions were made. It'd be nice to know why the decisions were made back then, because it appears that there was a conscientious effort to remove it over years to get it completely to the place where they said none at all. So there was something that drove the UDO, because nobody just creates a UDO for the fun of it, right? I mean, they're not gonna try to cause problems with people in the community just for the fun of it, because they have to answer to their citizens. So clearly, somebody in the community did not want this to happen. Did not want childcare in their neighborhoods. That has to be the assumption that you make. So I mean, it would be nice to know the decisions, why the decisions were made, because, I mean, I'm not against it anyway, but I'm just always saying that trying to gain an understanding of why things are what they are, because they may still be valid. We don't know if we don't know why they were changed. You understand what I mean?
I do.
I mean, just because you may read something and say, well, that just doesn't make any sense at all until somebody tells you why. So, well, now I understand that, and it makes sense. And we have some issues with the town council. We make decisions that people don't understand. And then we tell them why, then, I understand that. So I'm just saying it would be nice to know, but I don't know how that records are maintained to go back to say why those decisions were made. They were just made. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know where that comes in. You were here during any of that time, Andy? I mean, because you were here forever. So, I mean, surely you were involved in some of this UDO problems, weren't you?
I was, but I don't recall why. If I could just, probably just toss out what I think is that generally in a residential area, you probably do not want child care centers as a general rule. So therefore, the UDO did not allow them. However, probably unknown to, you can't apply something to every single situation. Well, churches are allowed in any district, right? In residential districts, in any district. A lot of churches have after-school programs. A lot of churches have at my church we call Mother's Morning Out programs, which is basically a daycare program, if you will. I can only imagine that when these were removed, that they didn't think about those churches, right? And it's probably never come back up before, the need for it before the council. That's what I'm thinking. I really don't know, but just kind of logically thinking that's what I would think. Bob, do you happen to remember anything, from a daycare standpoint in residential? I mean, I would just think, as a general rule, you really wouldn't want most people would not want a full-blown daycare center, right? Lots of kids, lots of activity right beside their residence. So I think that's probably why it was removed.
One of the problems is, the UDA was farmed out. So it was sent to a person in Wilmington, a planner who does this, to redo the UDO. He met with a committee, okay, who, I don't know if any of y'all are on the committee, but I wasn't. And he went over with that committee, and it's that deep. Okay? So it is hard to absorb all the circumstances that would come up. And that's the group that worked on it. I think they did their best, they were looking at something like that. And, I think with Steve going through it, situation by situation, we're gonna end up with a lot better UDO.
To clarify, in 2008, the previous UDO removed daycares from churches, and 2016 didn't put it back. So it's been longer than that UDO change. It's been quite a while.
Okay, so I wasn't there then.
But the same issues apply. I mean,
But I would think that's probably the reason.
But I mean, so the question, so they deliberately, they specifically removed it from churches in 2008, is that what you're saying?
that's right.
I mean, not just daycare, but in the community, but. That's not what it says here, though. I'm sorry, it didn't say that. It says, subsequent union development order approved, and to that remove daycare centers from the list of permitted uses in all residential zoning districts. It didn't say anything about churches.
That's correct. That's what I mean.
Okay,
That's
that's
probably,
why
was
I was
probably.
making sure, so they didn't say anything about, they did not include or exclude churches in any of this, they just made a blanket statement.
For all
All
residential,
residential,
and
and
probably, that's what I was saying,
Okay.
it probably did not take into consideration the fact about churches actually, which are permitted in all districts, having quote-unquote childcare programs. That probably just didn't think about it.
All right, that makes sense.
That's what I would think.
I mean, the special use permit process, Mayor and Council, is a process where if there are perceived issues with adjoining properties and the intensity of the use, reasonable conditions can be put on a permit to address those conditions above and beyond the special use supplementary standards. So that, keep that in mind. You know, if the buffers seem inadequate or the location of some aspect of the site or the way the site's laid out, you have the ability to conditionalize a permit to fix any of those issues, which can help the neighbors.
So just follow one other question. So then the question is asked, that Councilman Scott had a statement was that these non-conforming daycares, you don't know how many, you have no idea how many of them were churches.
I don't know.
Because it's not all, because this would not change the nonconformity of those that have daycares in communities that are not churches. The UDO change that we're proposing would not have an effect on that, would it?
No.
Because it specifically talks about churches.
It would only be allowed in residential districts in a church.
Okay, that's what I just want to make sure I clarify that. Thank you.
Mayor, I have one other question. Mr. Winsman, when an applicant, whoever it may be, asks for this, do they have to pay a fee?
They do.
What's the fee
It's 400.
to ask for a text amendment
That's right.
for the town's error?
That's right. Well, in some cases, it may be something that the town is intentional about. In some cases, like this one, maybe it was something that was just overlooked. So you don't really know the intent until you dig into it.
Any other questions for Stephen at this time from the council? Okay, are there any comments from anyone in the audience at this time? Not seeing any. This time I will entertain a motion and second to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing, Mayor.
Second.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, gentlemen. There are some recommended motions. You see those on the screen, and they're actually, I believe, printed, in this case, in your agenda as well, on page 7. Should be 6.
Mayor, I think that the daycare offers to the community, and we already have many of these, and we haven't any problems that I'm aware of. I make a recommendation, we approve the motion as written by staff, and also refund the applicant their money for this error, for the $400.
Second that.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? So just for clarification, Stephen, is this a new use, this request? Is the applicant, is this for a new use?
I'm not sure if I understand. There's no church there. There's no daycare there now. There's a church.
Right.
And the only way to,
So the
for
church,
them to do what they wanted to do, we looked at the options, and the text amendment was the best option.
well, that's what I mean. So the church right now is not operating a daycare center.
That's right.
Correct?
That's right.
Gotcha. So therefore, they're not in non-conformance,
They are not.
right?
Nope.
Gotcha. So I guess to Councilman Scott's statement, I don't know that this was an error on the town. Because as you stated, it may have been done intentionally, right? I don't know. I don't remember, but I just want to make that clarification that I don't know that it's really an error of the town.
With all due respect, Mayor, it sounds that there's other businesses that we're gonna make conforming by fixing this amendment tonight. The text amendment was a $400 fee, am I correct?
That's correct.
And there's an application fee also for special permit.
No, I mean, I understand what you're trying to do. I just want to say I don't know that it was necessary. I don't know that it was necessary, an error. You know. That's all. That's my whole point. But, all right, there is a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Not with the pleasure of the council. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Can I get a clarification? Do you want staff to refund the money?
Yes, I think that was part of the motion. That is correct. Yep. I'm not sure, though, did the second part of the motion, was that Councilman Scott? I'm not. Yeah, was that part of your motion as well? The second paragraph here on the screen? We actually need to.
Yeah, that's fine, I mean, as written. I'll make it a motion, a second motion, if that needs to be done.
Second.
Do you need us to officially say that?
Madam Clerk is shaking her head yes. So,
As written.
So do we need it on the motion or is it?
so I'll need a motion,
Okay.
exactly the way that is written under recommended motions, number 2, or right here, right there. So,
Mayor, I make that motion for the second motion as written on the screen.
second, okay. All right, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Gentlemen, I just want to remind you, I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but we do have legal things that we have to do as part of our motions, and the clerk needs to record those, and it needs to be part of the record. All right, so please make sure that when we're doing this, that we're making those motions, okay? All right, we'll move on now to the next one, which is SUP 20-07, Lindsley Thomas. This is a quasi judicial hearing, so the applicant does need to be sworn in. So if the applicant will please come forward to the podium here.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, again, it's SUP 20-07. The applicant is requesting a special use permit for a child care center as an accessory use to a church on property located within an R6 residential zoning district. The properties considered for approval are located on the northwest side of Second Avenue, approximately 200 feet southwest of its intersection with West Street. The properties are further identified as Johnston County Tax ID 1506601 and 1506623. This time I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I move we open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Stephen, turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you. So the church in question is the Greater Vision Worship Center Church of God, located at 720 Second Avenue. And this property continues all the way across to Blount Street. So with the text amendment you just approved, child care centers are accessory to churches require a special use permit. Here's the property. As you can see, it does continue all the way to Blunt Street. And you can also see it's actually consists of two properties. There's a small triangular piece, kind of on the north end there. And there's a condition of approval to attach that to the other property. So this is the site plan for the church. Originally, they came to us with two separate parking lots not connected. And we kind of worked with the applicant and rearranged things to, we think, improve the flow of the site. Particularly, the concern was cars would be coming into a parking lot, finding it full, having to drive all the way around the block, looking for the other parking lot, finding it full or not, creating a lot of extra traffic in the residential neighborhood. So we wanted to make it as efficient for people when they arrive to find their parking, hopefully on site, not on street, as quickly as possible, and make the drop-off smoothly and be able to drive through the site, as opposed to backing up and having issues with kids and drop-offs and congestion. And that created some issues with the playground. The playground is a little further from the church than they originally planned. However, to address that, they've added a fence along the parking between the church and the playground to provide protection for the children when they go out to the playground. And we also then suggested relocating some of the parking along Blunt Street as opposed to where they had it to make the site work better. So with that, I think we've got a site plan that both parties are able to work with. The mayor went through most of this, the property identifications for the two properties. The applicant is the owner. It's a 1.21 acre site in the R6 residential zoning district. Single family on all sides. R6 zoning all sides. It's a 25,019 square foot church. Right now, it's accessed from 2nd Avenue with two curb cuts on a gravel dirt driveway. There's no real defined parking lot. There's no stormwater, no curbs, no landscaping. The Blunt side of the property is a grassy area, kind of separated by a row of trees. So right now it reads as two different sites, but it's a single site. Yeah, the trees are sort of the middle of the property, and there's a small shed located behind the church. There is a concrete sidewalk that heads to 2nd Street. It doesn't quite reach 2nd Street. The last 5 feet is grass. There's no curb cut. With this planned daycare, they're proposing, in addition to the church, a 611 square foot addition to the rear of the church for sanctuary and clergy room, kind of a stage area, and offices. And then another part would be the child care center using about 1,000 square foot area on the south side of the sanctuary. So with this application, we'll be requiring or suggesting a condition to combine the two lots into a single lot. Buffer yards are required between residential and non-residential uses. The UDO requires a type B 20-foot buffer yard or a type C buffer yard in this case. Because they don't have enough space for a 20-foot buffer yard, a combination of fencing and landscaping is allowed with the type C. So as long as you got the fence there, you can reduce the buffer yard, and that's in the UDO. They're proposing a 2,250 square foot playground, as I mentioned, behind the church. And I talked about the fence. And I talked about the vehicle access through the site. And there's no pedestrian access all the way to Blunt Street, but we want to make sure there's pedestrian access to 2nd Street, which is the front door. So we're recommending a curb cut, a curb there at the end of the sidewalk. They meet the parking requirements. The sanctuary will have 112 seats, requiring 37 parking stalls. And the daycare will have a maximum of 24 children and 2 employees, requiring 6 parking stalls. So they do meet the requirements. According to the preliminary site plan, the new impervious areas would not trigger the need for on-site stormwater management, and none is currently shown on the site plan. A landscaping plan will be required for the entire site, bringing it into compliance with the UDO, and lighting would also have to meet the UDO standards. And that'll be, after approval, we'll require those site plans. So staff has its own opinion of the findings of fact, shown here in this slide and the next couple. I can go through that individually if requested so, otherwise I'll just skip to the conditions or recommendations. So staff is recommending approval with 3 conditions. One, that the site plan be submitted for review in accordance with the town's UDO, including supplementary standards for childcare facilities 7.4. So it needs to meet those standards. That the applicant submit a lot recombination plat for approval, combining the 2 lots into one, and that a handicap curb ramp be installed where the front sidewalk meets the curb on 2nd Avenue. And that is, the third one, there is a new condition that was not in your packet. That was after the fact, realizing that sidewalk didn't make it to the street. So with that, staff has recommended motions on the screen, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Any questions, comments for Steve?
Yeah, I just got a comment. Mr. Barber, if you don't mind, will you turn to page 21, please? And read that sentence on the request. I want to make sure. You say we're at the top. Could you read
Request,
it?
the applicant seeks a special use permit to add a building to the Johnston Community College located within our office. Yep, that's definitely not right.
My apologies, council.
I just want to make sure, okay.
Yeah.
That's why it's important when you're making your motions to actually make a motion and not say what's actually as written. Right, as written in your packet.
So I have a question. My question is, I was looking at the, so if you go to with the applicant, it says that the property owner is Leslie Thomas, so she owns the church?
That's correct.
Okay. So I just wanted to understand that, okay.
Any other questions for Stephen?
I did have one additional question.
Go ahead.
So just as we know, we get in bonds sometimes. So the question is, so since she owns the church, or owns the building that the church participates in, the question is, if for some reason the church disbands, not saying that it would, the child care center would then be out of compliance and they'd have to close down, correct? Because they're only allowed to have it as long as it's part of a church by the new ordinance that we just submitted, is that right?
That's correct. But the special use permit, as long as there is a church, may not be this
Oh,
church.
I understand, I don't have a problem, I just want to make sure.
Yep.
I didn't know, we get in bonds this way sometimes, I just want to clarify that I understood what we were voting on, okay. Thank you.
Having a cut on Blunt Street and then having a playground, is that gonna be kind of, having a second entrance on Blunt Street and then having a playground back there behind it, is that gonna be a problem?
I would imagine the children are supervised.
She said it would be fenced, right?
There's a fence, I think the playground's fenced, but the walkway to the playground is also fenced, so kids don't run off in the parking.
Any other comments? It's time for Stephen. The applicant, I have a question for you. So, do you have any other information, if you don't mind? Do you have any other information that you would like to share at this time?
Nothing other than we are a church. My husband is the pastor, and we will remain a church, and the daycare will always be a part of that if we are allowed to have this special use permit.
Okay. And then you heard the testimony that was presented by our planning director. Do you agree with his testimony that he presented tonight?
Yes, I do, other than the fact that we are no longer, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
The name of the church is now True Vine Apostolic Ministries Incorporated. And as you can see, we have 4 of our grandchildren here. We actually have 9 altogether. So it's kind of really important to us to have this special use permit just for the fact of the community as well as our grandchildren who are all 9 and younger. So we are a church with very many small children. I think we have about 12 altogether that are under the age of 9 and under. And then we're in a community with a lot of children and families, so I feel like it would benefit the community greatly to have access to the daycare center.
All right, and you mentioned that the name of the church has changed, that's all, right?
Correct.
And what was the name of that again?
True Vine Apostolic Ministries Incorporated.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is there any comments from anyone else that, in the audience that's been duly sworn to speak on this matter? Okay. Not seeing any, if there are no further questions for Stephen, I will.
I got one question.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
If she reached the maximum of 24, would she have to come back and, I mean, she's got 12 now, it sounds like. If she gets to 24, would she be able to still operate and get more, or is that pretty much the
You have to be
limit?
compliant with the standards, the state
So
standards.
24 would be the max, okay. Does she understand that?
I just wanted to say also that we are going through the state to get licensed. So we're going to make sure that we're in compliance with the Department of Health and Human Services as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mayor, does the name change do anything legally to this document?
I don't think so. I'll defer to the town attorney, but I think as long as we notate it.
We can vote as is. Okay.
So what exactly should go into this request, besides this Johnson Community College stuff? What are we actually, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Where this mistake was up here?
Yeah, so whatever your motion, the motion will be tonight, right? So that's what will be the official record,
Mr. Mayor, can I move we close the public hearing?
right? Yes, sir. Have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? So just one point, I'm just looking, Councilman Lee, at the special use permit that's actually in our agenda, the actual application, not the write-up from staff. So the application is from this church, except for the name change. I think we're fine. There. Okay, so gentlemen, we do have, we did vote on closing the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we do have 8 findings of fact. We can go through each one of those individually, or you can vote on them as a whole if you would like to. I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to approve the 8 findings of fact for the special use permit SUP 20-7 as recommended in the staff report on pages 18 and 19.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the 8 findings of fact. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. And then we will need another motion, and if you agree with the 3 conditions that have been recommended by planning staff, that those 3 be included in your motion.
Mayor, I move to recommend approval of SUP 2007 for a child care center as an accessory to a church based with the 3 conditions of approval. 1, that a site plan be submitted for review in accordance with the town's unified development ordinance, including the supplemental standard for child care facilities, section 7.4. 2, that the applicant submit a lot recombination plat for approval to combine the lots into one. 3, a handicap curb ramp be installed at the sidewalk at 2nd Avenue.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. We got all the council plus one.
Got a junior council member.
All right. So, motion carries. So, thank you very much. Good luck with everything. And, these are your children? Grandchildren. How old are they?
9, 2, 5, and 4.
Very, very well behaved. Thank you for attending tonight, and thank you for being so well behaved tonight. All right, at this time, we will move on to citizens' comment. If there's anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. If you will, please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Rick Mercer. I live at 193 Fireweed Place in Clayton. I'm here to introduce myself this evening as a candidate for the Johnston County Board of Education. As you know, that's on the ballot in November. That's a ballot that some folks will start receiving toward the end of this week by mail. There are 4 seats available, 4 seats up for election. I decided to run for the school board because I became extremely discouraged by the chaos and, frankly, the incompetence that we've seen at times on the current school board. I have 2 daughters in the school system, one at East Clayton and another who just started at Triple S. So I can promise you one thing, and promise this to the residents of Smithfield, that the success of Triple S is very much, at the top of my priority list, and the success of its feeder schools as well. I've been a part of the leadership team, staff leadership team at the town of Garner for about the past decade now. Before that, I was the editor of the Clayton News Star when Stuart McLeod owned it, when it was family owned and really based in the community, not an N&O newspaper. That professional experience will prepare me to serve on the board and be an effective and honest member of a governing body. But the most important thing is the passion and integrity I think I'll bring to the job. I will work with commissioners on fair funding of our schools and dealing with our growth issues and making sure that we put the interest of families and children ahead of the interest of developers. I'll not shy away from focusing on some of the pressing equity issues that we continue to face in Johnston County Public Schools, including a fair distribution of resources and experienced teachers across all of our schools. I'll also be the kind of leader, I'm sure, who will always listen to his constituents, but will be willing to make the difficult decisions, the right decisions, and not the easy, wrong decisions. If that's the kind of person that you think you'd like to see on the school board, I'd be honored to have your support. Residents, council, Mr. Mayor, you can go to electrickmercer.com to learn more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mercer, for coming this evening. Anyone else?
Hey, how are you?
Good evening.
Me again.
How are you? If you will, please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Omar McKnight. I live in 4560 Hargrove Road, Raleigh, North Carolina. Again, I'm here again pushing the same issue that I've been going over with the ordinance division for the entire grass season. Again, I had come last meeting, and I said early on, prior to email, that I said I will be vigilant this year, and that's just what I'm doing. However, we still have an issue on Old Goldsboro Road where a lot hasn't been cut. One of the gentleman who owns the lot next to the resident came through and cut at it. However, it's not cut properly. I get it. But at the end of the day, there's still another lot that has been untouched all year. I have numerous emails, probably 14, 15, maybe even more than that, from code violation, Mr. Cho, so on and so on, about the chain of command as far as being out of code. I'm familiar with code. Myself, just graduated with my law degree as well as my MPA. So hopefully I'll be up here amongst you guys shortly. But again, that's another day. So, but what I come to speak on is I'm not understanding why it's taking so long. Other residents are being threatened again with letters, so on and so on. However, some people still gets away with the same issues all summer long. So I just wanted to come to a consensus to understand, is there anything gonna be done, or where y'all at on the agenda? Also, Mr. Mercer, I don't know if he was here, congratulations to him, for running for for, Board of Education. However, unlike some of the constituents that I have who work well, one of the individuals who I think, if I'm not mistaken, does work for the town, and his name is, one of my constituents sent this to me on a racist Facebook post. However, I have a watchdog group that watches a lot of people. And Mr. Mark Lane, however, he made some hurtful Facebook posts. However, I can get him, I can send them, however you want to do. But I just wanted to call him out too. I'm just here to stir up good trouble, bro. This is my job. You know what I mean? This is my home. I care about my home. This is my city. I grew up right here in this city. Even though I'm no longer here, I still have a dual responsibility to be a part of the judicial process and everything that goes around in this community. So again, I'm asking not only that, is to hopefully get hopefully get something done about the high grass that's going on Old Goldsboro Road, which has been going on all summer. I can forward you those emails that have taken place from the beginning. So it's beginning to be a little frustrating. I got to take time off of my job to come here to be an advocate for the seniors who aren't able to get out here. You know what I mean? They asked me to come. I'm coming on behalf of them. So again, I just asked for a recommendation, and I asked for a something prompt, because I've been going on with this all summer long. All right, thank you.
Mr. Minot,
Thank you, sir.
one quick thing. Did you
Yes,
say
sir.
it had been cut or had?
It has
No,
not.
it has
It
not. Okay, I
Yes, sir.
misunderstood.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's fine.
And you said there's an additional lot. I know you-
Yes, sir.
I think
Well,
you
they,
spoke about that.
well, they cut the lot, which was the Kobe lot. That's cut. That's fine.
Yeah, because I think you spoke about two
Yes, sir.
lots
Yes, sir.
last month.
Yes, sir. And there's one next to a resident, the individual, Mr. Shellcroft. He cut at it, you know.
Okay.
I've also forwarded those emails to Mr. Tommy Cho and everything. So I've been communicating, however, I haven't been getting a response back. Prior it was, but now the communication
But you're
has
seeing
stopped.
the lot along Goldsboro. is
Yes,
not
sir.
taken
Yes,
care
sir. Because I too maintain 2 of those lots, so I
of.
know.
Okay,
that-
I
Yes, sir.
misunderstood. I
Yes, sir.
appreciate it. Thank you.
And we do have an item on the agenda tonight regarding grass and so forth. Mike, Bob, do either one of you wish to address this concern at this moment, or? I think it'd be best addressed when we reference the order. That's fine, no problem.
Mr. Mike, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Anyone else, citizens' comments? If you will, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Mark Lane. I live at 2108 Yelverton Grove Road in Smithfield. Tonight, when you all go into closed session, I would invite all of you to ask Councilman Lee to share the post with y'all. He's pretty familiar with it. And you make your decisions. I don't have any control of what people post, but the only thing I have control of is what I post. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak during citizens' comments? Okay, not seeing any. We will now move on to the consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
I make a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Excuse me. Now we'll move on to our business items. Our first business item is consideration and request for approval to allow the Downtown Smithfield Development Corporation to hold outdoor dining events on South 3rd Street on September 11th, September the 25th, October the 9th, October the 23rd, from 5 p.m. until 9:30. This request includes closing South 3rd Street for outside dining and amplified sound. This time, I will turn it over to our planning director.
I don't have a lot to add to this, other than the current order by the governor is a maximum of 50 people. And that would be, they'd have to follow whatever current orders we have. Right now, it says 100 people. So also, I guess the only other thing I could say is those businesses that have sidewalk cafe permits will be allowed to have cafes on the street, and those that don't would have to apply for that in order to have cafes on the street. Or on the sidewalk, but, right, in association with this proposal. Do you have any questions for me about this permit?
How many restaurants on that section of Third Street do have, what's it called, a cafe?
I believe Sodi Sopa is the only
Soda's-
restaurant right now that has a street cafe permit.
And if this goes through, right now, I know this was written in anticipation of things getting better, but it says 100 now, but what does Soda Sopa's outdoor seating area look like? And would this diminish, could this diminish their outdoor seating or not?
Well, right now, their outdoor seating is on Johnson Street, so they would be able to put some more tables out on Third Street for this event.
Mr. Brinsman, if things were normal, would that still be the same number, or are we looking, you mentioned the 50. The reason I ask is, so assuming things go back to normal, this wouldn't have to be changed. They can continue to do what they're doing. But this is just for specific events.
Not sure if I understand what you're saying, but they're asking, they think there could be up to 100 people there, so they want to have a permit for 100. However, currently, they could not do that because it would be against the law, so they would be restricted to 50 per the governor's order.
But should
Things
the
go back to normal, they could
governor
do
change his order or rescind the order, then they could have up to 100
Exactly.
on those other days.
Or 100 or more.
This says over 100.
Yeah, it can be over 100. The reason it comes to you is partially because of street closure, but also because it's over 100.
Okay.
It's one of the criteria that triggers.
I mean, so in theory, once everything's better, it could be
unlimited. It
200,
could be unlimited.
or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But currently, they would be restricted to 50.
How are you going to manage it?
So, the idea behind this was not to support necessarily one restaurant, but to give the ability of all of our restaurants to serve people, or not to serve people, but to provide a place to eat downtown to expand their dining rooms. So currently, dining rooms are at 50% capacity, and most of our buildings downtown are pretty small anyway. So if y'all, if the town tried to survive on 50% of revenue from property owners or electric bills, y'all know what the result would be. And it's sort of the same thing for the businesses. So it's not even just to help Soda Sopa and Under the Oak, which are in that street, in that block. But the idea is that somebody could get their dinner from Sammy's or from Simple Twist or Gotham's or the Gilded Pear and bring their food over to Third Street as well. So that's the reason for the length of the street closure request. In terms of management, we have hand sanitizer stations, would rent tables from a rental company, and would ensure that those are being cleaned between patrons, with signage as you enter the area that says that masks are required when not at tables, and encouraging people to follow the 3 W's: the wearing of masks, waiting at a distance, and washing hands. There are some other communities that are doing this already and are doing it in such a way that it really expands outdoor dining for restaurants, and the governor's mass gathering order number is not really an issue in those cases. So Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Wilmington, Chapel Hill, and then some smaller towns like Hendersonville, Belmont, New Bern, and Morganton are doing this currently, where they've closed streets, some permanently, at least during COVID, to traffic, and others on Friday and Saturday nights, like our request. So that's sort of where things are currently. Based on the street, I think you could have a maximum of 50 tables if you space them all out, even 25 feet apart, to give enough room for social distancing. So that kind of sets a threshold upward. But obviously, if the council prefers it to be smaller, then it could be smaller. So.
Just one other question. It sounded like when Stephen was doing his presentation, that it sounds like this would be subject to the governor's executive order and limitations. And you seem to think it wouldn't, so.
It's not 100% clear. There are other towns doing other things. You know, if it's 50, that's better for the restaurants than 0 at this point.
That was my question before. How would you manage that number of 50? Would you have a clicker, one walk out, one come in? Because I'm not gonna vote for something against the executive order. I'm just gonna be honest with you.
Sure, and I understand
And I
that.
don't appreciate you asking us to do that if you did.
No,
I
not at all.
misunderstood you, because that is not what I'm gonna do.
Not at all.
Executive order says 50, I'm gonna vote for 50.
Yeah, so the
No matter what
executive
you
order.
put in here.
Yeah, absolutely, and I fully understand that. It's just, like I said, it's sort of unclear at this point.
I don't know if
And
it's
we
clear
can
or
go,
not. I think it's pretty clear from what Stephen said.
well,
50?
that's, the 50 number is for a gathering.
What
So
is
the
this?
numbers for restaurants for outside dining space are a little bit different. So it's, and I would absolutely defer to Bob on that. And I'm not trying to argue that point at all.
I'm not either. I'm just saying, I don't think it's fair to us to compare the towns. You say it's not a problem when it technically could be a problem if the executive order says 50.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
It doesn't say that. It says,
She'll be putting tables out on Third Street for people to bring their food items from other restaurants and eat outside, socially distanced.
Mhm.
and she's expecting, the way it says, over 100 people. The way I'm understanding it's 50.
Mayor, I understand Councilman Wood's concern, and Sarah, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, enlighten me if you have more information on it.
I think, I know I struggle too with some of the regulations and executive orders. Perhaps this may help. Perhaps, I'm trying to think outside the box.
Sure.
That you would designate a certain square footage for each business. Let them manage it themselves. Now, obviously, we could provide your downtown corporation, and that could be considered part of their floor space where they're limited to 50% capacity anyways. And then the number wouldn't matter for the town to manage. So I understand your struggle, and I agree that we need to follow the rules as best we can. So maybe that would help. So.
Yeah, and I understand his perspective, because the deal is, if you do it the way you have it, then all the people in that area are in the same group. They got their food from different places, but they're in the same grouping. Therefore, you would fall under that limitation of 50 people. What he's saying, they have a designated space, all they're doing is extending or designating their own eating space, therefore they're extending their eating facilities into the road, correct? That's correct. And therefore, they can meet their 50% capacity or whatever it is for the governor.
Which may fall under a different restriction from the governor, outside of the 50 allowed for a gathering. I'm not exactly sure, right? I don't have the order in front of me, but if I'm hearing it correctly, there may be another portion of the executive order that applies strictly to restaurants and outside dining. Is that what I'm understanding?
I don't believe so. I think for outside dining, there's not a limit on their capacity.
Not a limit. Well, okay.
and-
Well, that's what I mean, regardless,
Sure.
right? I mean, if
And
there's
what
no-
some towns have done is very much that, where they will say, okay, we're gonna rope off this area in front of your business, and allow you to serve there, which we could absolutely do with Soda Sopa and Under the Oak.
Scott is referring to.
Absolutely. I'm not really aware of places that have created contained dining spaces for restaurants not adjacent to the property, so the Simple Twist and Gotham's and that sort of thing. But it's definitely something that we could explore.
Well, Sarah, I want to make one other comment. I just commend you for trying to think outside the box
Thank
to
you.
help our businesses, because we know they have struggled.
And don't take anything I said. I'm just not willing to, I'll make sure we're clear in what we're voting for. Again, what Mayor Moore said earlier, we do have a legal due diligence to do what we're supposed to do.
Absolutely, and I don't know that there's any.
And I do appreciate what you're doing.
Sure.
And I appreciate the effort, but I want to make sure we're doing what's right.
Yeah, I don't think there's any clear guidance about what qualifies as a gathering or event versus what qualifies as just outside dining versus, y'all know, there's so much gray area with all of this. So I just wanted to share with y'all what other communities are doing. Some communities, they've blocked off 4 blocks of streets, and some it's a block smaller than ours. So it very much runs the gamut. Some are doing parklets in individual parking spaces to expand outside dining. That doesn't really work for Smithfield, and actually I read today that DOT has even said that they'll work with communities to help with some changes to outside dining. Market Street, I think, would be a bear to try to close or to try to do parklets on, and would not advocate for that. But I think 3rd Street on Friday and potentially Saturday nights would make sense. So, and in
I can't
reality,
vote for that. We've got to be more clear than that. I'm
Sure.
not gonna vote for that.
so
Others can, but I won't.
mhm. 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 I don't know. That's why I brought it before the council. Right, absolutely.
Stephen, what are the rules for a sidewalk cafe permit?
Oh. They get a permit, they gotta show us where they're gonna put their tables, and they have to follow it. I'm not sure if they need to cordon it off if they serve alcohol.
Does it have to be an adjoining to the restaurant?
Yeah, it has to be adjoining the restaurant. So that's serving. If you're serving food out onto the street, that's a sidewalk cafe. What she's proposing is that people could take carry-out, walk across the street, and sit at any of the tables that are out to expand their dining. That is different than what Soy Southpaw would probably do. They would probably just expand their service through their sidewalk cafe onto the street. Under the Oak, could apply for that permit and actually have service out in front of their restaurant on the sidewalk, or have people do takeout for her proposal on the street.
I just think the argument that if it was to expand your dining capacity to get around the 50 number or the governor's executive order, that it would have, if you consider that part of your dining area, you would have to have service to that area.
I would think so.
I mean, I like the idea. I think it's great because everybody, I don't see how a lot of restaurants have made it as far long as they have.
Did any of the changes today affect this?
They changes today, you mean?
No.
Yeah.
Not
Because he
restaurants.
didn't-
But, I mean, outside space, I mean, didn't they communicate that parks were allowed to be
Yep,
sold back?
parks
to
can
the-
be open.
Parks.
I mean, but we don't need to get in the weeds about arguing about the executive order. I agree with you, Councilman, we have to follow the rules.
And my other question is, the problem is that you're gonna have entertainment, so that entertainment would make it perceived as a gathering of those people eating while they're listening to music.
If we need to get rid of the
No,
busker
I know what I'm saying.
completely, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we've taken this opportunity to say, okay, we can't do events like we normally would have done them previously. We can't have, hundreds of people sitting in chairs and dancing on 3rd Street. But what can we do, short-term and long-term, to make downtown Smithfield a place where people want to be, and a place where people feel safe? There was a survey done of North Carolinians that said that 40% of people will not go in a restaurant until a vaccine is found for COVID. And I have not looked at all of our restaurants and our businesses' books, but I know that many of them were down 80%, and still are not back to normal. And beyond restaurants, this would also help our retailers. They would have an opportunity to take advantage of the audience that's there as well. So, if we need to get rid of the busker component, that's fine. This would be one person plugging into one speaker, super simple, super low-key. But if it means that, it can happen, or it can't happen with the busker, it would be totally fine to get rid of that component of it.
Another thing too, I know a lot of communities are having food trucks come and stuff, and I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but again, how do you don't really control the crowd because it's general public, so I think if we just designate that we close downtown dining, not necessarily for an event, I mean, I'm not saying I don't know the verbiage, but, you know, for the what if we just close the streets, during the time you've asked? And, you know, not necessarily to have a gathering, just more for the patrons to come and have outside seating. But I think the major concern is the number. Is that what we're stuck on?
Sounds like it to me.
I know you can eat inside the restaurant up to 50% capacity, right?
So what if we approve this with the council's authority, as she's asked, and put the verbiage in here in compliance with the government's executive order, and let them figure it out?
I'm okay with that, as long as we, I'm just trying to.
And in terms of the arrangement of tables and that sort of thing, like, I'm totally fine working with the town to do a site plan and figure out exactly where the tables need to be and how many and all that fun stuff. I'm totally amenable to whatever y'all want us to do.
Would it help if you add another block, like maybe Johnson Street from Second to Third? Would that help any, or is that just?
Maybe. I think that's sort of hidden, and it would be far from where most of the restaurants are. At this point, I think if we can start with one block, if we see a need to expand it, and that's sort of in the application, if we see a need or if we see it be successful on Friday nights, then maybe we expand to, instead of every other, maybe it's every, or maybe it's Friday and Saturday. We may not have anybody show up. We don't know until we try it. But yeah.
Well, I applaud your efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, I do too. I just want to make sure we're doing it the right way.
Absolutely.
Mike, I think you would.
Yeah, I just want to have one point of clarity on this, because originally when this came to us, there was a lot of discussion about allowing alcohol in the street as part of this. And I want to make sure that staff understands what the council's wishes are, and that Sarah understands what they are. Sidewalk Cafe, as Mayor Pro Tem Dunn asked, actually is created primarily so that they can have alcohol out on the sidewalk with their dinner. And they have to have, I don't recall the exact amount, but a large amount of liability insurance to protect the town. And that's part of that permit requirement.
I think it's $1 million.
So if we're going to extend the dining into the street, we cannot legally extend the alcohol service into the street without amending our current ordinance on alcohol. It doesn't allow alcohol in the street anywhere in town. So I want to make sure that we're all clear as to what would be required for alcohol sales, consumption, and being allowed to have open containers. Legally, all they could do is extend a restaurant to the sidewalk with a sidewalk cafe permit if they're gonna have alcohol, and that's all the farther it can go. It can't go anywhere else. We can't carry it from Soto Sopa over into this area. It has to be served there, drank there, and left there by that organization. So I wanna make sure we're all clear on that. We're not mixed up as far as alcohol sales and alcohol use as part of this issue. I'd also ask the council, as it looks to try to find a common ground to help out the downtown and the restaurants, we really need to define, I guess, what you want to do. We can say that we want to abide by the governor's order, but we've already heard the town attorney say he thinks it's a mass gathering of 50 people would have to apply, and Sarah's saying, no, she doesn't think so. So we need to determine if it's a mass gathering based on, I've got the newest executive order here that went into effect and changed it to 50 people at 2:30 this afternoon. And are we going to abide by it being a mass gathering or not? Because just saying that we're going to abide by the governor's order is not going to give us the direction we need.
My son started one of these in downtown Raleigh. It's called Friday Park. And, it's very successful. No, I won't get 50 people here, so if you're going to do this, it's going to be a strain on the police department. Or you need to get the planning department to really plan on a certain number of chairs and tables that will
I guess one other thing that kind of causes a problem for me, and I guess Roger too, is the fact that because downtown Smithfield's applying for this, and it's specifically called Third Streetery Event. So it kind of goes back to, I think, where Mr. Spence was going. It is a mass, and in my opinion, it's a mass gathering, but I'm not a lawyer, but I just don't want to do anything to get anybody in trouble. However, I know all the restaurants are struggling. Would like to see something done to help.
You can have one entrance and one exit, and do the clicker, like most stores are doing now. 50 in that area. But the problem is, coming from the other side, you have to manage it.
Do you think 50 would work?
Sir?
I was asking her, does she think 50 would work? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was trying to, I didn't hear you.
So currently on Soda Sopa's sidewalk on Johnston Street, you can seat 16 for that one restaurant.
Is that at 50% capacity? Or that's regular capacity?
That is at regular capacity.
So they're only allowed eight right now?
Mm-hmm. Under the oak, if they, so my understanding is that they intend to apply for the Smithfield Stronger grant that we have authorized for outside dining furniture. And you're looking at potentially 2 tables under or in like the inset area, and maybe 2 on the sidewalk. So that's gonna be 4, 8, maybe 12 people. So at 50%, that's 6. You know, in my personal opinion, I think 50 people on a 400-foot street is not a whole lot. It leaves a lot of empty street. But again, if 50 is the number that we have to work with, 50 is better than 0. 50 seats being turned, 3 times if we can, is 150 people over the course of, several hours of the night. And it, it's not going to solve all the restaurant's problems, but I think it can only help.
So Mayor, it goes back to the first question I think was brought up. Should we put a number on it, just say per the regulation? I mean, if it's a mass gathering, as y'all pointed out, follow the regulation, the guidelines, and then let it ride. Y'all can try it and see. I mean, that's all we can do.
That's what I would recommend, yes.
Limited to 50, or whatever the regulation
Regulation is
And it
at
could be
that time.
100 if there's people coming out, but you'd have to manage that one entrance and exit from both sides somehow, some way, barricades or people there or something.
I don't know that that's really feasible, to be perfectly honest with you, because you have the 2 ends of the street, you have alleys actually you have 3 alleys within that street, and then with people that live on the street that can come out, I'm not trying to be hard to deal with. I just don't know how realistic we would manage that.
I'm just trying to abide by what the
Right, I mean,
executive order states.
if we could save tables that will, 50 seats at tables, I mean, is that
Yeah, that's fine.
reasonable?
That's what you do. Because I was thinking, if you also got business out on Smithfield, but you don't want to hinder people going through there because they count 50 people because they're in the mass gathering area. And they're not really mass gathering, they're trying to shop to get something else.
50 seats would
Yeah.
probably be better.
That would be
a better way to.
because then they go there and no seat.
Scott.
Right. Well, the senator said pass the through. What you're saying, you said pass the through.
Again, Mr. Spence, what is your interpretation on this from a legal point of view?
I think that the government is to keep the gathering below 50 people. So hopefully this gathering will expand, and maybe in a month or 2 it'll be 100 people. You know what I mean? I think that the idea of this purpose, I've seen its function, I've found them will run. But putting out empty spaces in an area
if you, so can I ask you a question? So in a street in downtown Raleigh where they have 5 restaurants, if they have seats for 10 people each outside, is that the same thing? Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. You can absolutely do that.
I think staff could work with Sarah to approve a plan.
Absolutely.
John does.
I'm good with that. Council staff? So, Bob, you're saying if we put 50 seats, that's not right. I mean, I'm asking clarification, so. Would be a mass, more than, okay.
Absolutely.
I'm not agree, I don't think you're right either.
Well, I guess the question is, do you get 50 chairs or 50 benches?
That's a good one. Had not thought of that.
I'd like to make a motion that we send this back to our planning department and let them work with Sarah and try to come up with a plan that council and the planning department and Sarah can all come to terms with, where we think everybody will be comfortable with the governor's compliance, and perhaps to revisit this issue prior to our next meeting, in case the numbers change or if there are any issues that arise. But I think let the planning department assist with this, and hopefully we can get something going soon so we can make a difference. Some of the restaurants, anyway.
To have a special meeting prior to October, if this is,
No, let's just let the planning department work with Sarah. And yes,
yes,
So not coming back to council.
not coming back to council.
At any time. Right? Is that what you're saying?
Yep, I'm gonna go with that. And then, as the rules change, you can continue to work with Sarah to increase our seating number.
I'll second that.
You also included in your motion, sir, that you're approving closing the street.
And approve that we are closing the street also. Thank you, Mr.
As
Manager.
necessary.
So Roger, you seconded that, you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
The amendment to the motion. Okay, so, Madam Clerk, do you need some clarification on this motion, or?
Do you want me to repeat and rephrase that in more logical English?
Clean it up a little bit.
You made a motion, seconded by Councilman Wood, to allow planning staff to work with Sarah on this event, not to, I'm sorry,
Not to exceed the governor's executive order limits. Adjusted as necessary.
and you approve closing the street.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, gentlemen, you
Good
guys
job.
understand that motion? All right, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And then we have another business item. Let's see, where are we here? Make sure I'm on the right.
It's the same thing. Take up.
It's a similar but more simple item.
All right, so, yeah, but it is a separate request, right? Okay. So business item 2, Stephen, if you want to step that way, sir.
So this one is similar with the busker, but it's just a busker outside for a take-out Tuesday event from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. So it's before you because of the amplified sound. The intent is just to allow people to come out and enjoy the music and have their takeout around the library space.
No tables, no outdoor seating, just music. Where?
No tables, right? Yeah.
Everyday walking.
There's a few seating areas out there already that exist, and we just could utilize that and enjoy the music and move on.
Say 11 to our permit says 10 to 2.
Then, oh, I'm sorry, the event would be 11 to 2, but yes, 10 to 2 would be amplified sound.
Any questions for Stephen?
Mayor, I do have one thing I'd like to say. And it's just kind of this, both of these, obviously, this is just a kind of a proposal, but I think that one of the concerns I have is big government outreach. Stephen, at what point in normal business do you go out and tell a restaurant they have too many people in their restaurant? Or too many people? Ain't the fire marshal do that? I mean, my point is why is the town getting in the business of regulating these things? The government's kind of tasked the individuals to manage the mass, you know. I mean, it's kind of an overreach, isn't it?
Well, they're asking for a special permit for something. Typically, if a restaurant's, they've got their zoning permit to operate, they have capacity limits, the governor put in a sense, like an overlay on that, saying you only do 50%. We're not involved in that, we don't regulate that. I don't think the sheriff in Johnson County even enforces that. But because they're coming to the town asking for special permissions.
You just answered my question. You said the word event. Yes, that's where that becomes a regulation from your perspective. So what you just said, and you're not overreaching
I
and
don't think
mitigating
we're
the
overreaching.
restaurants.
I feel like we need to make sure that what they're asking for is compliant.
Can I make, because this one is a little different than the other, because this one's simply, all they're doing here is requesting that they had to come to us, if we were non-COVID, they would have to come to us with this because they're doing amplified sound. So they're not looking for any really, they just added that thing about contingent executive order in place just in case they violated something. But there doesn't appear to be any violation anyway proposed by this, they just added it because of where the time is. Right, really, all you're asking for is just sound for that one event, those events, right? Am I right? Yep, that's what I thought. Mr. Mayor, can I make a motion, we accept this, move on?
You certainly can, sir.
I make a motion, we accept it.
A motion and a second by Councilman Wood. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Now we'll move on to business item number 3. Stephen, this is also you, and I guess maybe Bob, as needed. It's a consideration or request to approve ordinance number 505.
Yeah, this item is brought to you tonight, somewhat in response to the issue the gentleman mentioned earlier at the public comment period. Trying to strengthen our ordinance to efficient and to make code enforcement more efficient. So we're looking for an amendment to Chapter 8, Article 2, Section 8.27, amending the nuisance regulations as it pertains to tall grass and wooded areas, and adding a new chronic violator provision, Section 8.8-34. So really, the intent is to create code enforcement to be more effective and enforceable and utilize less staff time. So code enforcement issues, repeat offenders cause staff to address the same code enforcement issues over and over and over, typically on the same few property owners. Most people in town are very compliant and we don't have issues, but I would say Tommy spends 50% of his time dealing with the same properties every summer. And so this repeat offender clause, which I'll go into further later, is intended to speed up that process. And then we have difficulties enforcing tall grass nuisances consistently, particularly as it pertains to wooded lots, and I'll go into that. And then tall grass nuisances, public boulevards adjacent to properties are a problem because our code doesn't address it. So repeat offenders, as I said, only a few residents ignore the tall grasses and weeds, and until threatened by letters or ultimately the town ends up abating the property and billing them. But this process eats up a lot of Tommy's time because the process is you receive a complaint, you investigate the complaint and document it, you send a notice to the owner, they've got 10 days from receiving that notice to abate the issue. Tommy has to re-inspect the property, so it goes out there again. And if not abated, Public Works will be ordered to mow it and invoice the owner. By that time, the grass is already a foot long again.
So this is the way it is now?
Yeah.
This is current, okay.
So, it gives the perception that we're not doing anything, but it just takes so long to address it. And that's, some of the problems mentioned tonight. So this provision will allow the town to immediately abate the property if in the last calendar year, the town had given 3 violation notices. So after the 3 the previous year, we can just have Public Works mow it. We don't have to do all that public notice. They will just get it mowed and we'll bill them.
What is the collection rate when you bill them?
Can't remember. I heard ad hoc what it was the other day. Is it 50%? How much?
About half the time, people will pay what we invoice them for. A lot of times, it just depends. Some of them are willing to pay what we charge. We just charge exactly what it costs us. We don't ask for anything additional. So if they only have to do it once a month, it's cheaper than hiring a mowing service to do it themselves. So that is a disincentive for them to follow rules. And we run into that quite often. That's why when actually Bob came up with this chronic violator provision, which is in the state statute, and that seemed like a fix to a lot of this issue.
Maybe we should raise the rate so it won't be so convenient for them then.
Well, the chronic violator statute allows us to
put that on the tax roll. So we can collect whatever we've charged from their taxes if they don't pay. So that's one of the big issues here, to make sure that we get paid, and that way, force it, or maybe we'll win.
Mike, is that pretty typical for other towns? Just charge what, surrounding us, just to charge what it costs us?
I think our ordinance is very similar to other communities.
Okay.
I think it's very consistent with what you see around North Carolina as a rule. The next part of it, if we're ready to move on, is wooded areas. Currently, there's no definition of a wooded area. So when you got a property that has tall grass that emerges into weeds and quickly grows up with trees, the trees may be kind of small and the weeds are taller than the trees, and they say it's a woods. I can't mow my woods. So we're trying to provide some clarity to that. So the new provision would exempt wooded areas, but then it provides a definition for woods. Any tax parcel of property in which is covered substantially, all of its surface with trees of a size and density that the trees in themselves prohibit cleaning with a 5-foot wide brush hog type mower, in which in the opinion of the town manager or his designee is so substantially covered by mature trees as to be a wooded lot. Whether the parcel is so covered will be determined by a town code enforcement officer or designated by the, if so, designated by the town manager. So we're trying to provide some clarity in the code. What is a woods? What is not a woods? Any questions on that?
So you're saying if they can bush hog it, they need to bush hog it?
I'm sorry?
It sounds like if you could get a 5-foot mower, then that should be done.
Right.
I think, Councilman, you may recognize, last meeting that someone had planted trees on a lot. Was it the lot along Holmesboro Road, or was it a different? Okay.
Same lot.
Same lot.
The young man was talking about earlier.
So that would, we could do that without any repercussion, as far as we bush on.
As the gentleman alluded to, the lot was mowed last week, but they didn't mow around those 3-foot, 3-inch high trees, and the grass is 15 inches high in that area, which is right by the street, and the areas kind of behind and along the edges of the property are also unmowed. So, did they mow it? Yes. But did they address the issue? No. Only partially. And this would provide greater clarity for that situation. So right-of-way maintenance, this is a problem. There are certain property owners in town where they'll mow their property, but then they'll leave the right-of-way to grow long, and it becomes a nuisance issue. And that's particularly, you see a lot of that in the East Smithfield area, and there are many other places as well. But essentially, it's sort of a given understanding most places that you're responsible to mow the grass in the boulevard up to the street. And up north where I come from, you have to shovel the sidewalk in the public right-of-way in front of your street also. But there's nothing in our code actually requiring it, so what happens is Public Works ends up having to go out there and spending lots of their time and money, town money, probably unbudgeted, mowing streets. And so this would basically assign the responsibility to the property owner adjacent to the public right-of-way for mowing that street and maintaining the ditches as well.
Mayor, I have a question. So with this new policy, can we fine the state because they don't maintain theirs? That's a problem.
Yeah, it is.
It's terrible.
It is, very bad.
On this topic, across from the high school, obviously all the businesses that have gone in maintain their area. There are 2 businesses on the corner, and that is a DOT right-of-way along there. So would this make at Emerge Ortho, they put, not to call names out, but just as reference, I mean, they cut the grass all the way up to the highway, both sides of the sidewalk. They laid sod down when they built. On the other side, because of all the construction that was going on at the pediatric doctor, I believe is what it is, they didn't have access to that area to cut it. I can't remember if they were cutting up to the road before. Obviously now it's extremely grown up. Under this, would that make them responsible for cutting up to the DOT's road?
It says public right-of-way, it's still public right-of-way. Now, where there's safety fence, like along the new Durwood Parkway, I don't know if you would require them to go outside that safety fence. You know, they've got a wire fence along the whole right-of-way, and that's, you know, vacant property at this point. But if that fence stays up and you got a commercial property, I guess that's a question. Would we assign that responsibility to a property owner that develops there? Something that maybe we have to look at.
And John, that is one of the worst examples in town, because, I mean, you're not gonna have many of those. It's almost a city lot between, the pediatric.
It's a big area.
Yeah, and I don't know why DOT, reserved so much footage there, but they reserved a tremendous amount of footage. Maybe because they were having plans, I don't understand. It'll be interesting when they get through with it, and looked at it lately, much before it's through it, but, there was a lot of right of way, not like anywhere else. Almost another building.
Any other questions about this provision?
You said they're responsible for it. What's gonna be the penalty if they don't do it? There's nothing in here that says.
It would be the same abatement process, either.
So would you cut it and bill them just like that? Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't put the lien on the property, correct?
And this question, just because the town has, the public right of way, the land itself is still owned by the owner, correct? I mean, so like, my house runs up to the street, but there's a certain amount of land that the town has right of way, they go and do something they want to on it. But I believe, am I not charged taxes on that property? Is that not still part of my property? Even though the town has right of way for it, am I not still charged property tax on that particular piece of land? I mean, is that still mine? That's what I'm saying. Just because they can do what they want to do with it, is it not still mine?
There's dedicated right-of-way, and there are often right-of-way easements. An easement is, it's your land, but they have a easement for road purposes through it, which will include a boulevard as well. Or it'll be properly dedicated land, where it's city-owned, street right-of-way, and your land abuts next to it, and there's 10, 12 feet of grass between the curb and your property. So we'd say you're responsible for mowing that 10 to 12 feet between the curb and your property if it's a public right-of-way.
This is not the easiest legal issue in the world, and doesn't have the easiest solution. But basically, citywide, we have a gap. We don't even know where the right of way is unless you're a surveyor. You survey at the time because you can't locate it just by looking at it. But we obviously have a large number of areas where between the curb and the, arguably where the yard starts.
Next item, simplification of the tall and grass weed standard. So the old standard required abatement or maintenance of that if you're 100 feet from an open street, 100 feet from a property line of a lot with a structure, or 50 feet from an occupied dwelling. Just to simplify it, the new standard would be 100 foot from a property line with a commercial building or dwelling. And that has basically one standard instead of the three. I do have an image of an example. So this is East Market Street between Goldsboro on the north, Market Street on the south. Men's Progressive Club. You can see all the individual lots there. So 100 feet represented that yellow line, that's 100 feet from a property line with a commercial building or dwelling, which means the area, this whole area here would not fall into that standard. But the area around those buildings and the 100 feet from those property lines would be required to be mowed. One standard rather than the three.
I think we all can agree that would make it look much better around town.
And you could be more aggressive with trying to turn the street slow.
So I do have a question, and I just want to make sure we're clear. I think we're okay, but there are several wooded lots, if you will, in the town of Smithfield, lots of wooded areas, right? This would not then, I mean, we're not saying that it truly is a wooded area. Like, I'm just thinking down, that is Bookadary Road, right? Old Bookadary Road, right in front of Eden Woods. That whole property is wooded. I would consider that wooded, right? But there's probably a right-of-way that goes right in front of that where there may not be trees growing, but there are tall grass. Are we now saying that they will have to go in and maintain that area under this provision? Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to understand what this means.
100 feet is trying to keep us from trying to nail property owners all down that area.
Right.
There is a, right across from Triple S, there's a beautiful lot that's got tall pines on it, but you could easily get a bush hog in there and make whoever owns that cut it. But I mean, it's not next to the residence, it's not very near, and we're letting that go, with this now. Maybe when we get to be more urban, every single lot should have to be cut. We're not there, that's the philosophy behind it.
But the right-of-way would be subject to mowing, based on our ordinance.
You're referring to the lot between News Charter and Emerge Ortho, that,
Well, no, I was referring to one that's right across from Triple S. Well, that is too, which is closer to.
Clean that dirt you told me.
It's right across, it's right where the crosswalk is, close to where the crosswalk is. So you're further down to where the, cafeteria is, parking lot. Employees park, teacher park.
but whoever owns that under this would be required to cut, like I said, a minimum between the sidewalk and the road. Even though it is a wooded lot.
Well, it's.
The lot's wooded, but the right-of-way, if the right-of-way were wooded, you wouldn't have to mow it. But if it's grass, it should be mowed.
I like the idea of it. The only issue is, I know the town cuts some right-of-ways downtown. Do they not? And just to go back to somebody's getting ready to pick up a 50-foot right-of-way beside their business that's 100 foot deep, that's a lot of extra grass for them to pay to have cut, when some downtown businesses are getting theirs cut for free. I mean, I just have a problem with that. I think it would look great if everybody did it voluntarily, but to go in and force somebody to do that, just, I have a little problem with.
So we, like, the lot that Kenny Bliss and David Tetra we made,
Hmm?
the pediatric lot, yeah, we may be back for you with some amendments, but what we're trying to do is get a general overall rule that works. And I think some places, people are not gonna like the 100 feet from dwelling, because it may leave some grassed areas out in the town. But, you know, when I grew up, we always had a grass lot somewhere around we could play Indian or play whatever.
I also want to point out that we're exempting agricultural properties from right-of-way maintenance. So if it's like a wooded lot for agriculture or a farm field, we're not requiring right-of-way maintenance, because those are typically rural areas, and they would not be then subject to it. So Mike, you're suggesting where it says not including wooded areas, change that to wooded lot?
Well, not unless we also change to the wooded lot. So it's fine, instead of wooded areas, it's wooded lot. Then that will eliminate all of that issue. I don't have any objection to that. I think we're gonna, as we implement this, we're gonna, areas where people aren't satisfied. So it's gonna be, so this, you don't have many ordinances like this. They're just not that deep. Like, Kerry's got a detailed policy, but they don't even put it in the ordinance. So, this is what we want, more decent ordinance, stronger than Clayton or Wake Forest. We did it with Wake Forest. Like we're making them.
Comments, questions?
Any further comments for Stephen at this time?
I think if we, wasn't that already in it with the last ordinance amendment? That was with the tire ordinance. I believe that was with the tire storage ordinance. I don't know why it's read either. Maybe it was already read. Not good.
If the right of way, the width of the right of way is the problem, we always come back to this design with the right of way problem. In other words, we're not responsible for more than X feet from your property. We have to find people that.
I mean, is that a number you want to try to come up with tonight, or is it something you want to think about, or look at the properties and come back to us, or?
We'd rather you pass this ordinance and, as the town implements it, they're not gonna be unreasonable. And you can think about how many people have to be and how many applications of this property. Or if you want to, you can do it tonight. I don't think most, 15 feet is cover most people.
It would. And then what happens if it's 20 feet, then you got a little strip?
So, yeah, can I make I mean, maybe we just make a recommendation that, I don't know, are there any objections to the previous, Anything other than this right-of-way maintenance one? From anybody? I mean, I guess what we could do is approve portions of it, and then ask you to come back with some more clarifications on this. I think we're gonna run into some issues with this, to be honest with you.
Is that everything except for the right-of-way maintenance?
I mean, that's I mean, I'm just.
Well, I'm saying that's what you're recommending, that's what
Yeah,
you're-
I mean, that would just, it sounds to me like that's where there is a few issues there that need to be discussed.
I personally wish all right-of-ways was treated fairly, and I think that's what our goal is, but at the same time, the state, I have a real issue with that, because that new road we have is grown out of control.
I don't know how we would enforce it.
And I guess the other question would be, if it's a state easement, are we gonna enforce the city people to manage the state easement? You see what I'm saying? Because they're in the city order, going up to the road, and that's what you're asking for with the city street. What about the state street? I mean,
We could exempt,
I don't think we should exempt it. It needs to be cut.
The intent, Councilman, was to include all right-of-ways,
Okay.
regardless of who owned it, or who had the.
So if we pass this ordinance, we can just tweak it as the issues come up? I mean, we said we're open for discussion. Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Well, it's not just this year due to COVID, trust me.
cut back anyway.
One year's budget, next year it's whatever, yeah.
Go away in November.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion, we, accept this, ordinance, and, I recommend we approve it as is.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the recommended changes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Mayor, before we move off that topic, I'd like to ask staff one question. And I don't know the answer, that's why I asked. Mr. Scott, whenever we get power bill money, I know the state allows a certain amount of money that doesn't come to us for grass cutting. Could we ask them to, instead of paying the contractor, to pay the town, and we pick up the difference so we can make our town look better?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that. Could you?
Yes, sir. What I asked was, you know, the power bill money is allocated for the streets.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, it's not enough to do what we need, but my point is the state pays contractors, and like Mayor mentioned about the budget, and it's all over the state. My question is instead of them paying a contractor, could they just allocate that money to the town and we pick up the difference to mow our own town grass in areas? Because it looks crappy. I know it's a big question.
Yeah, I don't have the answer, but I can find it for you.
Yeah,
I think they have done that in the past. I don't know if they still do, and I may be wrong, but I think like around the interchanges, I think they have actually paid us. I may be wrong.
I know Benson does some of that, too.
I think it can be.
And I know it could be very expensive, but at the same time, it may not be. So can you look into that for us?
Most definitely.
Now we will move on to our next business item. It's business item 4. Consideration and request for approval to award a contract to Withers and Ravenel for professional services. Ted, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to come speak tonight. I'm here to ask the council to approve the proposed consultant and the proposed contract for the Town of Smithfield's America's Water Infrastructure Act Risk and Resiliency Assessment and the associated emergency response plan. Now, I know that was a mouthful, so let me try and explain what that is. In 2018, the United States Congress passed the America's Water Infrastructure Act, or what we refer to as AWIA. AWIA did many things, from attempting to improve flood control, to redefining the term navigable waterways, to spurring further development in hydroelectric power. One of the components of the AWIA is the mandate that every water system in the country perform a risk and resiliency assessment on their entire system soup to nuts. Each water system is encouraged to use the findings of this assessment to establish or update their mandatory associated emergency response plan. Based on the Bioterrorism Act of 2002, AWEA mandates that we focus on malevolent acts of terrorism or other intentional threats such as vandalism, cybersecurity, natural hazards. Specifically, the water system is to assess the risk to system-critical components such as physical assets that include underground pipes, storage tanks, water plant, treatment processes, source water intakes, barriers for security, electronic or automated monitoring systems, chemical supply, chemical use, chemical storage. Beyond the physical assets and the systems, AWEA also mandates that we analyze our current monitoring practices, SCADA systems, cybersecurity, our financial infrastructure, our operation and maintenance on the system practices, and the long-term capital plan to respond to a natural or man-made disaster. So as you can see, this is a comprehensive analysis that will take multiple months. So what is our deadline? A system of our size must submit a certification to the EPA that our assessment was complete by June 30th of 2021. And this table was provided by the EPA. A system
What
of
page
our...
are you on, Mr. Creel?
Sorry?
What page are you on? Do we have that? Is it in these packets here? I'm talking about the present. Oh, is it? Okay. Sorry, Mr.
Here,
Creel.
dude.
You got it.
Oh, okay, sorry. Caught up with me now? Okay. So a system of our size must also submit a second certification to the EPA that the emergency response plan was either developed or updated by December, or by the end of the year of 2021. So where are we in this process? Well, the town publicly advertised for qualified firms to help us with this assessment on July 29th. We received 6 bids on August 21st. These submittals were then reviewed by panel, and the panel concurred that the recommended firm of choice is Withers and Ravenel, a multidisciplined consulting firm based in Cary. So staff is asking the council to please approve the recommended firm, also authorize the town manager to execute the contract for these services for a project budget not to exceed $60,000. Thank you very much and for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Ted?
It's in the budget.
What was in the budget was, we had money under the water plant set aside for SCADA improvements, and we'll have to use some of that. To be honest, this was bigger than we thought it would be, but I called around to other municipalities, and this is right within the range of what they're doing as far as towns of our size. I even called the county saying, I got some sticker shock on the numbers, and they said, no, that's, because they had, being a bigger system, they had to turn theirs in earlier, a year earlier, and they paid upwards of $200,000 for theirs, and I was like, whoa. So we did have money set aside, but not quite enough, but I will be taking it. There will be no additional budget requirements.
Is there anybody that offers a service cheaper than this company? I mean, did you shop around? Are you gonna
Well,
have-
again, this is one of those services that I could not ask for the money up front. It's a qualified firm request, not a budgetary number request, so it's not a bid. It was for professional services so you have to pick the most qualified firm. But again, this is in the right realm as far as what the budget would be.
So if approved, then it will go out for a dollar bid, so to speak, at that
We'll
point.
negotiate a contract if approved with that firm not to exceed $60,000. There are certain services we can't bid out.
Don't put you in a great negotiating position, does it?
No, that's why I never like throwing the number out there.
Don't get me started on this subject.
But if I don't throw it out there, you guys would never approve it. I don't
Yeah,
blame you.
quite.
I don't blame you at all, but I'd love to get it for $20,000 or less, but it's just not gonna happen.
I understand you state we have to have it. I just struggle that we didn't make a line item in the budget for it specifically for this. It's kind of shocking to me it's just now coming up. That's just my opinion. Because SCADA's a whole different program. That's for you.
Right, part of the SCADA program was to assess it as well, so we would be using funds there.
Any other questions, comments for Ted?
Is this something that, because of the ongoing pandemic, that this date may be changed or not?
Not to this day, they've all,
Okay.
EPA's held it firm.
I was just wondering, obviously, as Travis brought up, the SCADA was, and if you had allowed in your SCADA that of the number we set aside, this much is for this specific thing, and it's just off because the dollar amount's more than you thought, that's one thing. If you lumped it in that to start with, but if it wasn't designated with that, I think, you know, it's a fair amount of money to come up as a surprise when we knew the deadline, so if they're not gonna change the date, obviously we have to be in compliance, so there's no question about that, but.
I love these things.
Yeah, I do too.
Councilman Scott's right. We were remiss in not budgeting this properly this year. It's not in the budget. Had we budgeted it, it wouldn't have been a problem to pay for it because we had $350,000 that we set aside for possible expenses at the water plant. And that would have just been $290,000 instead. So if you're concerned about it, we can take the money from there and leave the rest of the budget intact as it is. That's what would have occurred had we budgeted for this properly.
Yeah, but this benefits more than just the water plant, doesn't it?
But that money was put in the water plant budget. It wouldn't have been put in there at $350,000. That money was there basically depending on where we were going to go with the water plant. It wasn't a budgeted amount. It was money that we didn't want to add in contingency, so we put it there for future use. So had we budgeted properly, that's where that money would have came from.
Doesn't look like we really have much choices, do we? Because I think we really don't have, you know, so, Mr. Mayor, I make a recommendation. I move that we approve the recommended consultant award contract for professional service to perform a risk contingency assessment response plan with the town of Smithfield.
Motion and a second to approve, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Okay, we'll move on now to business item 5. Mr. Manager, I believe this is you. Consideration request for approval to hold Veterans Day fireworks display.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item in front of you is something that is a result of our COVID-19 atmosphere. We had a lengthy discussion this evening with Sarah about downtown and things that we should try to do to encourage people to be frequenting our establishments and whatnot. And it's very difficult, as we found out, to find things to do for our citizenry that isn't considered a mass gathering. So as we were reviewing some options, trying to find things for our community and things that they can look forward to and maybe get out of their house with, we kind of realized that we had this Veterans Day coming up on November 11th, and wouldn't it be great if we could honor our veterans a little more than we normally do this year as a result of COVID-19 and other things that are occurring around the world. So what we looked at this process, and we kind of looked at a neighboring community that had a 4th of July fireworks celebration and what they did and how they managed it. and it was managed very well. I went to it myself, and people drove up in their cars, they parked wherever they wanted to, you know, away from everyone. They were able to either get out or look through their windows and have a good time with the fireworks, and then when they were done, they were able to drive back home from wherever they were. The biggest issue was finding a location central enough to where we could shoot fireworks off, people enjoy them, and be able to see them from, you know, from a long distance away. So we looked at Community Park, we kind of settled on that as being a place that we could do this from, where people could park in any of those parking lots from the schools or any of those businesses around there after hours and enjoy this without having to violate any governor's order or worry about being closer than 6 feet to someone or even getting out of their cars if they didn't want to. I'm one that goes to church every Sunday, and we have a church service in the parking lot at South Smithfield Elementary, and we sit in our cars and have it there. So it'd be a similar situation. Once we started talking about it, we kind of expanded that we could maybe get a local radio station involved, play patriotic music during this event that people could tune into on their cars. We've already talked to the Air Force Base in Goldsboro, talked about maybe having a flyover before the event. Seems like that might be, Seymour Johnson, that might be a possibility. We just have to ask for that and explain what we want. We even talked about maybe having a parachutist come in and land like they did at News Charter School last year. Some things that people can do from their cars to enjoy this stuff without necessarily violating any orders. Bring extra people into town. Maybe they would frequent the restaurants. Maybe they would frequent the gas stations. Maybe they would go to the outlet center beforehand, spend the day. Veterans Day is one of those events that doesn't have a whole lot going on. We can research other communities around us. It doesn't look like anybody's doing this. We talked about maybe doing Facebook Live as well for some of these events, have the mayor give a little speech beforehand. We've already talked to the ROTC at Triple S, they're willing to participate. So we could expand on this idea that we can have something nice, celebrate our veterans without violating any orders and allowing our citizenry to have something that they can look forward to. So that's kind of how this thing was hatched. The $10,000 budget figure was a round number. We have received a couple of quotes from different fireworks companies. It's probably going to be closer to $75,000 to $8,000. So that's our request tonight, is to allow us to put something like this on. And we have plenty of budgeted funds and saved monies in Parks and Recreation to pay for this because we haven't been using any part-time staff, which is our biggest line item in the SHRAC budget. We have over double this amount of additional money because we haven't had expenditures. So it's not something that we wouldn't be able to pay for out of the Parks and Recreation budget, which is normally where it would come from.
Questions?
I have a comment. Thank you, Mr. Scott. I think this is a great idea. I know it mentions here at the community park. Is that kind of a set data location, or would you consider something more commercial?
That's just where we came up. We're just trying to find something centrally located in town that has a lot of parking close enough to it so that people can look up and enjoy the event. If you have another suggestion, we're certainly open to that.
Yeah, I don't think I have a good suggestion because I know it's hard, but I've often wondered if, in July 4th celebration, if we could partner with other towns and put on a bigger display and invite them and include them as well. But I don't know if that's feasible with your timeline, but certainly Selma may want to be a partner with this and do it kind of on the city border or something. I don't know if there's a plot that would work, but I think it's a good idea.
We're certainly willing to seek that out and talk to Selma if we want, but I'm not sure where we would find the location.
I understand. Mayor, I make a motion we approve this.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Council.
We'll move on to our next item, which was removed from the consent agenda. I think it was consent agenda number 7, I believe it was. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Consideration and request for approval to adopt changes in utility late fee policy. Greg?
Yeah,
You
Mayor,
want
I
them
think
just
we
to go
can make
through
this
it, or?
real quick. We've already had discussions. Mr. Seiler, thank you for working on this for us. The only question I had is on page 79. I think it's a text amendment. It may just be interpretation from my part, but it states in here that this, in other words, the late penalty, this includes mail received after the due date regardless of the posted. Does that mean the postmark, or are you talking about once you receive it? The postmark. Okay, so it would be the postmark.
If we, right, correct.
Okay.
It could be postmarked prior to, but if we received it afterwards, the penalties have already been enforced.
So that's what I was concerned about. So let's say their bill's $200, they mail it, but it comes to you past the late date. They're still gonna owe a late fee.
Correct.
Could we change it to if it's postmarked by that day, that way that they know they're sending the correct amount?
It would be a very manual process.
I mean, that's
And one that we would have to catch because the late fees are done lump sum. It's a process we run.
Okay.
Anyone that doesn't have a payment posted gets a late fee.
Okay,
So
I
I
understand.
understand what you're asking, but it would be very labor intensive.
Okay. So make,
like a credit card. They don't care about postmark date. They just care when they receive it.
right, okay. No problem. I guess, Mayor, since we brought it to this, we need to just motion to approve. I'll make that motion. Thank you, Greg.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the revisions. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move on to council members' comments. Anyone wishing to speak?
Mayor, I have a couple comments I would like to make. I wanted to ask the question to the manager, and he doesn't have to respond, but I just wanted to ask his opinion. We were told that the city was being allocated CARES Act money, and I was just curious if we have had any further discussions about what that money would be used for, or is being used for.
Yeah, there's we're eligible for about $450,000 of CARES Act funds. The way that money works is that the money goes straight to the county first, and then they allocate the money to the cities or the towns. They have already allocated us our share of that $450,000 and change, and that money is in the bank here for Smithfield. What we have to do is turn in a monthly report until the 1st of January that shows how we're being reimbursed for that money, because this is a reimbursement. But one of the eligible expenses is police, sworn police, and fire. So they are automatically something that is reimbursable. So their wages, their benefits, all of that is reimbursable. So we are turning in monthly reports showing that what our police department is costing us and what our fire department is costing us every month, which would be over $1 million by the time January rolls around, to allow us to basically maintain and keep that $450,000+ in our general fund, and to use however the council so wishes after January 1st, when, the reimbursement is done. But we're not allocating that money at all right now. We did use some of our own money that is also, could be reimbursable for the video camera system out here that allows people to use, and the different door locks and things that we've had to put on town hall to accommodate COVID-19 and the way we're currently doing business. But other than that, we haven't allocated or plan to allocate that money at all.
Mayor, I'd like to ask the manager to look into if we could allocate some of those funds for our employees, our essential employees. those that have been stressed by this, which is pretty much everyone. And I think it would be fair that if we could maybe possibly look at that element, because I know a lot of other communities are doing that. And it's just a way to continue to support our employees. Could you look into that and do some research on that?
Yeah, are you talking like in a bonus form or something?
I'm talking about, you might would refer to it as hazard pay.
Hazard pay? Yeah. Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, that's real quick. I want to publicly thank Mike Scott. I know it was last month. We've been talking about the tall grass issues or whatever. I should have did it last month, but I forgot. But you know, just still trying to work with some of these families. I know this one particular family. You know, one of the owners. You know, she was battling cancer and she ended up passing away. But Mike Scott came out his pocket, I came out my pocket, and, you know, we kind of took care of that, so didn't really have to come back to Stephen or Public Works or anybody, so I want to just thank you for that. I wish I could pay to get everybody's grass cut. I know Mike Scott's salary is about 3 times mine, but no, I really want to say thank you for what you did, and it meant a lot to the family, and, you know, but it was a kind donation from the town. Didn't really say who. I know you really didn't want me to tell you, but they're here tonight. But just want to say thank you for what you did, and it meant a lot to that family. That's all.
I'd like to just make a quick, brief statement. After last night's rain, early morning rain, just a big thank you and recognize our fire department, police, and mutual aid and first responders we've had, and the help of all the victims that had suffered through this, and especially, of course, there's 2 children missing. I know Councilman Scott mentioned that in our invocation. I just hope and pray that we can find those children. And I know it's been a long, hard day on most of the fire department, police, and first responders. I know Councilman Scott, you're a first responder, and I don't know how they do it, what they do, but a big thank you to them. You don't know how much you need them until something like this happens. So if you see one, thank them for what they do, because they work hard and under, you know, life and death situations on a daily basis. So I just want to tell them thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a few comments. We're still working through how we can implement drones in Smithfield as far as the town utilizing drones. And I didn't know if that was on your report. I was trying to see if it was on your report. But we have had a couple of meetings. We had a meeting just last week. We are moving forward and trying to determine. We've got an outside consultant who can come in at no cost to us to give us some information related to how they can be used in firefighting and how they can be used in the police department, public works, utilities. And so they're going to come do all that presentation. Anybody like to come could, you know, they're welcome to do it. Of course, you need to make sure we don't violate the 50 people. We're excited about getting that working so that we can come up with some proposals on how we can utilize drones to make Smithfield a better place and save money and be safer. That's the objective, right? It's not the objective to just come out with drones. The second thing is that we're working diligently on is we want Smithfield to be a drone-friendly community where people that go buy drones, they know where to go fly them at, and they know how to fly it properly, because people are buying drones all the time and they just don't know what to do with them. And so if we can provide a drone policy in the town and designate location, we've had several discussions on some good possibilities of some locations where people can go and fly without having to worry about things. And so we're working towards that. And I think you'll find that there's lots of towns and municipalities who are working towards developing those things. It's important to have it in case you have some type of legal issue where somebody does something they shouldn't do. You have a policy in place to protect the town too. So, but I would like to say I appreciate all the people in the town who's involved in working on it, and we're excited about moving that project forward as we, get some more. Hopefully, we'll get something eventually we bring to town council for them to look at.
One more quick thing. Yesterday, somebody texted me and saw Gary over there by the old swimming pool. What was going on out there, Gary? Oh, we're taking off the splash pads and getting ready to start construction. Just staked it up. Okay, all right.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to just say, Councilman Scott and Councilman Wood touched on the events of last night. Our fire department, along with the sheriff's department, Four Oaks, Princeton, everybody responded. Our fire department trains constantly, just as the sheriff's department, they all have swift water teams. Well, we don't, but every day, the police, sheriff, fire department, EMTs, they all train, and when the time comes, they put their life in danger to help other people. So, as Councilman Wood said, if you see somebody, be sure to thank them for what they do. A lot of those people are really having a tough time today. They were under a lot of stress physically and emotionally last night, and just be sure to thank them.
So you basically just said exactly what I was going to say.
Not a problem, Andy.
But I do, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, nice work, sir. But I think we can reiterate it, right? I know Mike and I were conversing last night at 2:30 in the morning of the events that were taking place on Galilee Road. And for those that do not know, right, we had a family that somehow swept off the road in a vehicle containing a mother and two kids. The mother was recovered, or rescued, I should say, and along with one of the children. And this goes into where the emotional part goes into play. It's not just physical exhaustion, but as they were attempting to rescue the mother and one of the children, the boat capsized, and one of the children was swept away. There was another child supposedly in the car, and as of tonight, as of before this meeting, had not been found. So still searching, haven't given up, and the search has been called off for tonight. But I assume it will continue tomorrow, from all that I know. The area there's a lot of water in that area, and it's a very difficult area to get into and to get out of. But as everyone has mentioned here tonight, I do want to publicly thank, and I'm sure I will miss someone, but obviously our Smithfield Fire Department and Smithfield Police Department, because it's not only in that area, right? Highway 95 flooded last night on the south end of town. We were running rescue calls there and helping people off of 95, as well as other areas throughout the town. So we were inundated by calls, so therefore mutual aid was called in, and I believe, I don't want to misquote, but I believe Princeton was the first. I believe Princeton was first in the water on Gallery Road. I believe, I'm not sure, but other fire departments participated in that rescue effort. Wilson Mills, Princeton, Four Oaks, obviously the sheriff's department, highway patrol, Wayne County Sheriff's Department was called in. They also assisted with it. So just a huge thank you to all of those individuals that worked throughout the night, throughout today, to continue that search. I know people are absolutely exhausted physically and mentally. I have reached out to some members on the Four Oaks Fire Department to personally thank them, because I know they have to be under a lot of So not only that, I want to thank our Public Works Department and our Public Utilities Department. Ed, I'm on duty. My power went out at 11 o'clock last night. Didn't come back on till 9:30 this morning. But I'm on Duke. I know. But I was out this morning at about 6:30, and the town utility trucks, as well as Lenny Branch, was out on Country Club Road, which was flooded, and down checking on our pump station there. So I was able to speak with Lenny this morning, and Lenny, I know, had been up all night as well. Chief Blanton, just a fantastic job to keep Chief Blanton on the, if you did not see the press conference this morning at 8:30, Chief Blanton did a fantastic job under the circumstances. He told me he was nervous and he'd never done that before, but if you look at it, you would have never been able to tell. So I think he did a fantastic job for someone who's been under that much stress and had been up all night, basically all night long. So it's a great job to those. And again, hopefully, there's still hope, right? We, still may be able to find these children alive. That is my hope and my prayers, but my thoughts and prayers do go out to that family and to all people that have been involved in that search. Again, I'm sure I left somebody out. So all the agencies that participated, North Carolina DOT as well. But not only that, from that side of things, we did have at least 3 businesses that were substantially impacted by the flooding. Mike and I toured those businesses today and reached out to those business owners to see if there was anything that we could do as far as offering assistance. But I mean, just water everywhere, right? And I was coming back, going home down 301 South last night about 10 o'clock, and I can say that I have never seen Highway 301 in that condition in the years that I've lived here. The water was moving. In fact, we did not even turn off Highway 301 by Dr. Jimmy Oldham's office on the Country Club Road. We were scared because the water was so deep and it was moving so fast right there by Holt's Lake. We turned around and parked in Dr. Oldham's driveway until we felt like it was safe, but I've never seen it like that. It was moving. So don't know what happened in the Galilee Road. There is a sinkhole out in that area. We don't know what happened, but public service now. But please, if you're driving and water's rising, please stop. Do not go through water. So with that being said, again, thanks to everybody. Outstanding efforts on the town, and we'll just hope for a positive outcome to this situation. So, thank you. Mike, I think it's now time for your report, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a few things. My report this month is a little longer than usual, so if there are questions about it, any of it, I'd encourage you to get a hold of me, and I'll try to answer your questions best I can. I had a lot of questions about Equity Drive. When are we going to start the reconstruction of Equity Drive? As everyone's aware, we've already awarded the contract bid. We've met with them. We are waiting on a phasing plan, since we're going to be phasing this in, starting from the north, going to the south. And we anticipate getting that by the end of the week, so we could even be out there starting to stake things out by Friday. If not that, it would be early next week. So we'll be moving on Equity Drive relatively quickly. You'll start to see some movement on that area. A quick briefing on some of the storm damage to the town itself. We do have a little bit of damage in the culvert areas of Vermont and Meadowbrook, and also Crestview Drive. Those are 2 streets that we had problems with during the last hurricane last year that were washed out, and had washed out way back during Hurricane Matthew as well.
Now, the streets are fine, so we don't need to reconstruct those, but the culverts where the water just ran so hard, pulled the dirt away from those and started to kind of hollow out under the road. So this is a repair that we can make in-house. We can just fill those areas up with concrete and they'll be just fine. But those are the two areas that we've identified that are town-owned properties that were damaged and that we'll have to assert repairs on relatively quickly. On the last page of your report of mine, you have the utility accounts and information that I promised you every month in arrears. This is a little different than the last 2 months because we now have entered into contracts with people. So that money, if there's a contract in place, even though that money is in arrears, it's not really looked at that way. So you'll see we jumped down quite a bit from $128,000 last month to only owing $22,000 this month. And that's the amount of money that people have not yet created contracts for. There's a new column to the right called contractual obligations, and you can see that we now have $81,431 under contract with people to have that amount paid off by the first of the year, within 6 months. And everyone seems to be working hard to follow those rules and working with us. Citizens of Smithfield are great. Our customers are really outstanding. And if you add those two together, we're only at about $103,000, which is still $25,000 less than we were at the same time last month. So we're making a lot of progress here, and people are working with us, and we're trying to work with them as much as we can. So if you have any questions about these graphs or these numbers, please let me know, and I'll try to answer them for you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
I'd like to make a motion, we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A1.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to go into closed session. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Go into closed session at this time. Thank you.
Staying here, right?